First of all, let me welcome all of you to this special installment of the Robert M. Mill Labor Management Institute. This afternoon we'll be focusing on cybersecurity, and as you all know that we have a stellar cast of individuals who will be talking about that, taking your questions and giving you perhaps some indication of how Greater Pittsburgh is going to proceed in becoming what we call a national center on cybersecurity in terms of both training and application. I think the panelists, particularly Dave Hickton, will talk about specifically, and you'll have an opportunity through our good friend Bill Flanagan to present any comments or questions that you'd like to make. My name is Alex Johnson, and I'm proud to serve as the president of the Community College of Allegheny County, and you are situated at our Allegheny campus, and the campus president here is Dr. Donna Imhoff. For those of you who are not familiar with the Labor Management Institute, it came to fruition about 3 years ago, and the idea was to showcase Pittsburgh's great legacy with respect to labor and management relationships. This program is endowed with a $1.2 million commitment from individuals, corporations, and also different organizations from throughout Greater Pittsburgh, and we're delighted because as a result of that, it can exist in perpetuity. So thank all of you who have made that special commitment to that. I want to recognize also 3 individuals who have played an outstanding role in the development of the Labor Management Institute, particularly around the academic programs that have been established to promote it. First of all, Professor Jackie Cavalier. Is Jackie here today? Okay, Jackie was instrumental, along with Charlie McCollister and also Mary Frances Archie, in developing a curriculum that ultimately went through our college council, 2 weeks ago? And I had the privilege today of signing off on that, so I'm delighted with all of that hard work. We do have several faculty members who are part of that program here available today for you, and I'd like for them to stand and receive a well-deserved round of applause. Charlie McCollister, Mary Frances Archie, where are you? Please stand and be recognized. We also know that cybersecurity is so important to the future of security, particularly of the United States. And the contemporary ways in which to deal with conflict are going to be dealt with through technology. Also, we do know that individuals who are engaged in terroristic activities will now focus on the internet as a way of adopting their strategies in order to communicate, recruit, and use different ways to deal with their issues. But we also know that in order to deal with what will be concerns or challenges related to technology applications with respect to security, that we have to have a trained and educated workforce, and that's what this discussion is going to revolve around today. I'm delighted that we will have David Hickton, who is the United States District Attorney in the Western District of Pennsylvania. We've got Dr. Ernest McDuffie, who is a leading expert on cybersecurity, who joins us from the National Institute for Cybersecurity Education. Many of you know Mike Dunleavy, who is the business manager and financial secretary of IBEW Local 5. And then, of course, we have Jinx Walton, who is the Chief Information Officer at the University of Pittsburgh. So to get the ball rolling, let me take this opportunity to introduce our next speaker, and that will be Dr. Charles Bloxage. Thank you, Charlie. Okay, so you got it.
First of all, let me thank all of you for coming out today on a day after a holiday. I certainly appreciate it, and I'm certainly gratified that the motivating factor for bringing you here is for this interesting topic that we have for you today. I want to make a few housekeeping announcements, and before I get into that, let me first of all express my thanks to those members of our advisory committee who are here with us today. We have a very robust advisory committee for the labor management lecture series. It's comprised of individuals both who are very active in our labor community as well as in the business and management community. So I'd like those members of the advisory committee to please stand if they're here with us today. Please rise. These individuals, it really isn't their participation really isn't the normal participation of advisory committees that you see in a college community. These guys are really engaged. They're really part of this fabric in both the labor and business sector, and they're very important, and we're very grateful for the service that they provide here at the community college. As far as some of the housekeeping chores that I have, within the packet that you received when you came into the auditorium, there's a small index card. These cards are for your use that at the point in the program when Bill Flanagan comes to the podium and wants to entertain questioning our panel participants, you have the opportunity to write down questions. They will be secured by staff members in the auditorium and given to Bill, and you'll be able to interface and interact with the panelists in that manner. We also have an evaluation form that's important, and we'd appreciate if you would complete it at the conclusion of the program. It's very helpful for us in planning the next event and making certain adjustments and modifications in order to make these lectures better in the future. This is our fifth lecture. They all have been very well attended, and we really understand that it's driven by the quality of presenters that we have with us. And it gives me great pleasure at this time, who really has been an integral individual in not only helping us secure these panelists, but also in planning the programs here at the college. And that is our dear friend and chairman of the advisory committee, Leo Gerard, President of the United Steelworkers.
Before I do the honor, I heard Charlie say that you'll get a chance to make a comment and or possibly make a criticism. And I want to encourage all of you to make a positive comment about Michael Dunleavy. Michael had just agreed that he'd take back to his board a substantial contribution to the fund. So right off the bat, you score big, Michael. Let me say, for me, I feel this to be a real privilege to get to introduce someone that I consider a friend and someone who I believe, as the state's attorney, cares about all people. And I don't think we could have a more current topic to discuss than the one you're going to discuss today. And our moderator has been instrumental in making sure that that issue is at the top of the agenda. I can tell you that in many cases it scares the heck out of me when I see some of the incursions that are done into our business community, into the labor community, into the political community, of the kind of hacking that's gone on and the kind of security that we need to make sure that that doesn't steal the kind of secrets we need to have a strong industrial base in this country and positive job growth. So let me get on with my real duty. David Hickton was nominated for United States Attorney for Western Pennsylvania by President Obama. He was actually sworn in as the 57th U.S. Attorney on August the 12th, 2010. David not only did that, but in his earlier days started his own was a partner in his own law firm, was a member of several important law firms. He's a fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers and a fellow of the Academy of Trial Lawyers of Allegheny County. David is also admitted before the United States Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, United States District Court for Western Pennsylvania, and several of the U.S. Circuit Courts. Previously, David was involved in a wide range of community activities and has been a long and active supporter and participant in organizations benefiting children in the arts. And at this point, I want to take a little bit of a license that our union has been doing work up in the Hill District, training young men and young women that have been disadvantaged and have difficult time finding jobs for various reasons. And we've developed a training program that's 6 to 8 weeks up in the Hill District. And David has come to our offices to hand out certificates to these young men and women. And I see the smiles on their face when they get to see the United States Attorney in a much different light than some of them had seen him before. And I can say that with the help of the building trades and the help of many other institutions around Allegheny County, we've been successful in getting some of these young men and women into real jobs and having them start off a different career in their life. And David has been instrumental and been a guiding light and has been a great advisor to our people that are doing that. So I did want to take the opportunity to just point that out. He's also been a member of the Executive Board of Public Theater and served as its president. David was a longtime member of the Pittsburgh Cultural District, a nonprofit organization that uses the arts and culture to reinvigorate downtown Pittsburgh, and we see that he's been successful there. His nomination as United States Attorney marks David's second presidential appointment. From 1999 to 2001, David served as the President's Advisory Committee on the Arts for the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts at the request of then-President Bill Clinton. David Hickton is a graduate of the Pennsylvania State University, and I shouldn't tell your age, but in the early 80s, he was a graduate of the University of Pittsburgh Law School. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend, our moderator, United States Attorney David Hickton. David.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you very much for that warm and generous introduction. And thank you, Alex, for all the leadership you have provided. It's not a secret you're leaving, and we will miss you. But your spirit here at CCAC and leading these programs will remain. And as I've said to you personally, you will not be far away, and we intend to bring you back. Leo Gerard and I are very good friends. He is both a friend and mentor to me. We have collaborated on a lot of projects. The important work that he was talking about, the U.S. Steelworkers Green Jobs Training Program, has become a key tenet of our reentry work, helping folks get a second chance after they've run afoul. These programs were all government programs and top-down, and through the inspired leadership of Leo and others, we've begun to recognize that organically developing programs from the ground up often are the best programs. Leo's contributions as a leader of the United Steelworkers are very well known. His community contributions have been vital to our region. But what I think is most special about our friend Leo is his keen understanding and insight that we all need each other to succeed, that partnerships between management and labor, between the private sector and the public sector, between the urban cities and the suburban neighborhoods, between the young and more experienced, the affluent and the poor, are all critical to meet the challenges we face. And the leadership that Leo Gerard has provided in collective bargaining, the trade battles, worker safety, the environment, and charitable giving to some of our nonprofits, often partnering with his counterparts like John Surma, the CEO of U.S. Steel, have sustained our community and led us at a time of great challenge. So Leo, we are all indebted to you for your leadership, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. This labor management forum on the cyber challenge we face comes at a very important juncture. And it should come as no surprise to residents of Western Pennsylvania that the FBI has moved the cyber threat to the top threat facing our country and our people. Top officials like former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta and FBI Director Robert Mueller have predicted that we will inevitably face a cyber Pearl Harbor or a cyber 9/11, and that's how grave this threat is. Certainly here in Western Pennsylvania, our experience with the disruption of cyber bomb threats at the University of Pittsburgh last year and the recent DDoS attacks on the banking industry, and particularly directed at PNC, have heightened our awareness that this problem is real, it is upon us, it threatens our lives, our prosperity, and our collective security. That's the bad news. The good news is that President Obama and his entire administration, including the Attorney General and the defense and intelligence communities, have taken steps to position us to meet this challenge. Many of the nation's top resources to meet these threats are right here in Pittsburgh. The National Cyber Forensics Training Alliance, NCFTA, is over on 2nd Avenue. CERT, formerly known as CCERT, for the Computer Crimes Emergency Response Team, is a collaborative in conjunction with Carnegie Mellon. And we here in the United States Attorney's Office, in recognition of this threat, when we reorganized in October 2010, established a dedicated national security and cyber section to align our resources with the leadership in Washington. This group is the first group I meet with every Monday morning. We take our work extremely seriously. We operate as if the entire security and safety of our country depends upon what we are doing right here in Pittsburgh. And this model has been followed across the country. Our partners here in the federal, state, and local law enforcement components are all on board, and we are making the collective commitment for us to be successful. Our cybersecurity conference last October, sponsored by the University of Pittsburgh and the United States Attorney's Office, is tribute to this. We had a range of outstanding speakers talking about the cyber threats, what is being done, and what needs to be done to fill the gaps. This past January, we invited Paul Kaminsky, currently the chairman of RAND, to visit with combined law enforcement, community leaders, and to talk about all of the problems that we face going forward. Paul is a former Deputy Secretary of Defense. He is recognized as the godfather of the modern stealth technology. He is also participant on several high-level boards which work on these emerging cyber issues. And his work with us last January has had a contrail in terms of a lot of the work we're talking about today. These are just two examples, and there are many more of the steps we're taking every day. And I can honestly say I work on the cyber threat every single day. And that is because it is real, it is substantial, it is evolving, and there is a real and present need for us to improve our game, our response, and our resiliency. Today, we are blessed to have a very distinguished panel to consider some of the issues presented by the cyber challenge with a sub-focus or specific focus on the workforce development issues. When I was asked to participate, I was honored, and I jumped at the opportunity to join you. We are especially fortunate to have with us Dr. Ernest McDuffie, lead for the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, an office which reports through the Office of Science and Technology at the White House. Before we get to work, and I introduce the panel members and we begin the discussion, I want to take advantage of this platform to issue a community challenge. I propose that by Labor Day this September, we form the Pittsburgh Cybersecurity Initiative, a public-private collaboration to fuse our resources to multiply our response to meet this threat. This initiative would include increased awareness of the cybersecurity challenge, increased education at all levels, from elementary school through postgraduate education, increased training and certification programs, increased vocational opportunities in the cyber jobs of the present and the future, scientific research to develop best practices and bolster resiliency, and increased investigation and prosecution of cyber crimes. In anticipation of today's program, much work towards this end has been underway. For example, Linda Lane, Superintendent of Pittsburgh Public Schools, and Linda Hippert, Head of the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, have agreed to participate in developing joint curriculum for cyber and to offer increased cyber training and competitions like and including the Cyber Patriot competition introduced to us by Mr. Kaminsky, and which I encourage you to read about online. Cyber Patriot is a high school-based program which enlists students to develop cyber defenses and inspires high school students to pursue careers in cybersecurity. Chip Carter and Ken Gormley, deans of Pitt Law School and Duquesne Law School, who are here today, please rise so we can thank you for your attendance and your work. Have been meeting with me on multiple occasions to talk about developing a joint program in collaboration with Carnegie Mellon University to offer a cyber law specialty and to develop signature cyber law institute programs which will further highlight our already recognized capacity for excellence in this area and perhaps put us in the position that students who come to Pittsburgh to get their legal education may become cyber proficient and cyber experts and help lead the way in that critical area. Mike Dunleavy, the business manager of the IBEW, who's going to speak as part of the panel, and Alex Johnson, who you met, president of CCAC, have been meeting with me and a larger group, which includes Leo Gerard and Allegheny County Labor Council President Jack Shea, my friend, to develop and expand upon the existing certificate program between the IBEW and CCAC for the specific purpose of training and certifying individuals with cyber expertise. In addition to these steps, we've been talking to the RAND Institute and members of the corporate and foundation communities to develop a pro forma to acquire the necessary research and to identify information gaps to get ahead of the fluid and emerging issues presented by this cyber challenge. These are just some, and other efforts will be taken in the spirit of this institute and are designed to help us better meet the cyber threat, to better do our part of the national defense effort, as well as to provide education and training opportunities for our local residents. The people of Western Pennsylvania are known and recognized for their effective and diligent work and have responded to the call that this country has made whenever we have been threatened or challenged. And I believe there is no place better, Dr. McDuffie, to find the cyber workforce that you are looking for. I want to share with you off text this. If you do a little research on cyber workforce, you will find that Secretary Napolitano last June dramatically called for an increase in our capacity and that we need more skilled cyber talent and professionals at all levels if we ever expect to meet this threat. I don't want to steal Dr. McDuffie's thunder, but there have been extraordinary estimates of how much the cyber threat has increased in the last several years, and obviously we have not met that increase with a number of trained workers to deal with it. And not every worker needs to go to college. In fact, what we found in Cyber Patriot is that many of the students who were not headed to college were in fact the most cyber proficient. And this wonderful program, which began with 5 teams competing, is now in 5 years become a very large competition. And the students, some of whom were not intending to go to college, who did not test well on the conventional testing, find themselves with scholarships to some of our finest undergraduate institutions because they have been identified through this program. Many of these efforts we are undertaking, increasing public awareness of the cyber risk, broadening cyber education for students at all levels, and cultivating and managing a talented cyber workforce, spring from the pages of the National Institute for Cyber Education Strategic Plan, which you will hear about. In closing, I want to make this firm pledge. The United States Attorney's Office, as long as I'm at the helm, will place a top priority on responding to the cyber threat at every level. Whether it is criminal identity theft, theft of individuals' savings, or theft of corporate intellectual property, disruptive hacktivists or anarchists, cyber terrorists, or cyber crimes by actors allied with nation states, or any other cyber crime, we will aggressively investigate, charge, and prosecute cyber criminals. We will give no quarter. We will be relentless in our approach to protecting the public from this threat. We will lead in this emerging area to develop the best defenses, the best practices, and the best intelligence, and we will strive to make Western Pennsylvania and the United States uninhabitable for cyber predators and cyber criminals. And we will not rest until we succeed with your help. Thank you very much. I would now like to, thank you. I would now like to invite our distinguished panel to come up and join us. We are going to have a panel discussion which I will moderate. I want to call your attention in the program to this small included outline of today's program. And in there are beautiful pictures and full background on each one of the members of the panel. I don't intend to repeat that, one, because it's done better than I can do it, and two, as you can see the difference between the font I read and this font. But let me begin by inviting Jinx Walton up first. Jinx Walton, for the last 12 years, has been the Chief Information Officer at the University of Pittsburgh. During the course of the University of Pittsburgh bomb threats, Jinx was without a doubt one of the most valuable players. And what this points to is in all matters, but especially the cyber area, you cannot expect us to identify this problem and solve it alone. Particularly in cyber, you are the entry point for the cyber criminals, and I mean you, the public. We will be relentless in investigating and pursuing these criminals, but if we did not have the great help of Jinx and her team, which was 24/7 for a month, there is no doubt we would have not had the success we had there. And before I have Jinx come up, I want to identify Paul Hull, who is chair of our National Security and Cyber Group in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Paul's over there, and seated next to him is Jimmy Kitchen, who is the lead prosecutor on the University of Pittsburgh bomb threats. So thank you, Jinx. I next want to invite up Mike Dunleavy. Mike, like Leo, is a good friend of mine, and he has had a wide and varied career. I think he began with the IBEW at the same time he was taking classes over at West Virginia. And Mike has served in leadership and labor, but also worked for Sargent Electric for a period of years where he was managing their business and negotiating against labor. Mike is a very, very, very insightful individual, and if you have a moment, and you have the time to go over to the south side to the IBEW and take a look at the training program that has been put together over there, you would do yourself a big favor. This program has been benchmarked by our national leadership. It has been benchmarked by the leadership of countries around the globe. It is providing real and sustained opportunities for our residents here in Western Pennsylvania. It is in some ways an existing platform partnership between the IBEW and CCAC that we are building upon to take advantage of the obvious connection between the talent in the IBEW and the need in the need to build the cyber workforce of tomorrow. So Mike, would you join us up here? And our final panelist is Dr. Ernest McDuffie. Now, in addition to reporting through to the President, Dr. McDuffie has been the lead of NICE since it was founded in 2009. And prior to that, he served as the Assistant Director for the National Coordinating Office for Networking and Information Services. And before that, he worked as an officer in the, as the Deputy Director of NSTAR in the Office of Naval Research. And before that, he worked for the National Science Foundation. We are really pleased because there is a document that we will have references for, and I don't know whether we're going to be able to produce copies of it, but the roadmap, the strategic plan that has been created by NICE under the leadership of Dr. McDuffie is the gold standard. It's the state of the art. It demonstrates the need to develop the cyber workforce, the imperative to develop the cyber workforce if we're to protect ourselves, as well as the how to develop that workforce. And for Dr. McDuffie to come and join us today is a great honor and privilege. Thank you. So with that, I think we'll begin the discussion, and we'll let the last speak first. Dr. McDuffie?
You want me to come here?
I think is this mic active?
Yeah, I've got it. I can just do it from here?
Your mic is active.
Okay. Great. Well, I really appreciate that introduction. It's been a long couple of years. This job kind of wears on you after a while. Those of you who have security clearances know that the threat is not only real, but it's very scary. It actually, every time I hear a classified briefing, it causes me to lose sleep at night. So I try to stay away from them as much as possible. But I want to just share a few minutes with you a couple of things. Number one, from the federal perspective, what's going on, how NICE came to be, and where we're going. Under the previous administration, there was a thing called CNCI. It's the Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative. This was the first attempt of the federal government to really wrap their arms around cybersecurity in all facets, operational, education, training, everything. There are actually 12 initiatives under CNCI. Initiative 8 was the Education Initiative. When the administrations changed, the Obama administration took a look at CNCI, which was primarily federally focused. It was internally looking, just seeing what was going on inside government, mostly classified, and decided that the issues were so important and so big that they needed to have a different approach. They wanted to make it unclassified and broad. We wanted to look out to the country, form these public-private partnerships, and really engage the entire population, particularly in the area of education, training, and workforce development. So the NICE initiative inherited everything that was going on under CNCI 8, which was the education initiative under that program, and we've expanded it over the last 3-4 years to really look at everything. We've got 4 different components that we focus on. There's a national awareness campaign surrounding October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. The Department of Homeland Security has been running that effort for 10 years. This is actually the 10th anniversary of Cybersecurity Month in October. But now they do more than just events in October. They actually do things around the calendar year. They get out into the communities, spend a week at a city or a location, engaging with local champions, local educators, government, first responders, Similar to the effort that you described that you'd like to see here in Pittsburgh, there are a couple of examples that I can share with you offline of other cities. San Diego comes to mind with their Secure Our E-City initiative, where they've done exactly the same thing. Tried to bring together all the stakeholders within their local community to address this issue from the bottom up and the top down, because it really is everybody's problem. So that's the awareness campaign. We have a formal education component that's being led by the National Science Foundation and the U.S. Department of Education, where we're looking at curriculum, K through 12, undergraduate, graduate, community college, the entire spectrum to ensure that we have the right curriculum available, the focus on activities like cyber competitions. The U.S. Cyber Patriot is just one aspect of that. There's there's the CCDC, the Collegiate Cybersecurity Defense Challenge, which is university competitions across the country. There's U.S. Cyber Challenge run by Karen Evans. She's an ex-CIO for OMB. They go out for a week to different universities, do a week-long camp. I do about 4 every summer. They'll have courses on ethics and cybersecurity issues, and then a challenge. And these things have been so successful. They're usually sponsored by industry. A few years ago, I was at an event at Cal Poly in Pomona, out in California, sponsored by Boeing. The winning team, there were some 8 people on the team, 7 of them were graduating seniors. They were so impressed, Boeing was so impressed, they offered all of them a job right on the spot. Not only a job, but the idea was to keep them together as a team, because teamwork is really a very important facet of what happens in this space. So we've seen a lot of that happening. Last 2 components focus on workforce development, the structure of the workforce, training, professionalization. We've contracted with the National Academy of Sciences to conduct a study about what it would mean to professionalize the workforce in cybersecurity. Should there be more certifications? Should there be a license? Would it be a state-held license or a federal license? Lots of issues about that, lots of pros and cons. They've held workshops in DC and San Francisco, and the last one was in San Antonio, Texas, to really get a sense of what the whole country is thinking in terms of these activities. They'll be publishing a report on that to advise the president later this year, probably in the fall time frame. Workforce structure, one of the biggest things that we've done since our inception is develop a document called the National Cybersecurity Workforce Framework. This document decomposes the cybersecurity workforce into 7 specialty areas, some 31 different skill sets. Cybersecurity is much more than just an individual configuring a firewall or looking for intruders and doing the kind of things that you typically think about in cybersecurity. There are policy issues, there are procurement issues, there are support issues, R&D issues. It goes on. And it really opens itself to the cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary fields that most universities and colleges are pursuing these days. The idea that you don't necessarily need a college degree to work in this space is absolutely true. We find tons of people who are self-taught, who are out in the field doing real work, used to be hackers, want to come away from the dark side and do something positive for society. There's room in this wide area for all those. Community colleges in particular are going to play a key role as we move forward in terms of retraining the workforce as a stepping stone between college and 4-year institutions, and as a flexible education institution that will allow them to keep much more up to date with what's happening as this field continues to evolve much more rapidly. So I don't want to take too much time. I know we're under time pressure here, and we've got others to speak from, and I've got a flight back to DC at 5:55. So I'm going to leave it at that, but I'm really looking forward to your questions, and hopefully we can give you some good answers today.
Mike, how about you? Why don't you talk about the program that you have in place now and how it might be a platform for future work?
First of all, by saying I'm probably the least knowledgeable panelist as far as cybersecurity goes. But our area of experience is vocational training, training a workforce other than a 4-year degree, established curriculum. We have a partnership with CCAC. It's been very successful. We are currently now training approximately 400 apprentices to become electricians, experienced in all areas of electrical installation, data, telecommunications, low voltage, medium voltage, high voltage. and have a great graduation rate and a great success story to tell. As I read the report of NICE, I saw many parallels. I saw the idea of going to the K through 12 community as something that we already do to try to convince people that not every kid needs to go to college. It's that time of year where you go to high school graduations and you see in the program 85% of the kids are going on to a 4-year school, and you know a significant percentage of those are not going to complete that 4-year education. Well, we have the ability to take those students and provide an education for them, a vocational education, where they're trained in an area of need, and I see cyber as being one more area, one more discipline, where that kind of training would fit one level of need within that cyber workforce.
Jinx, tell everybody what you do and how it's changed over your 12 years.
Well, actually, when I first moved into this role, we had half of an FTE responsible for security, and that person mostly spent their time changing combinations, lock combinations. About 2 years in, we started to see all these security threats, and we started to build up our whole program. We now have 11 people in an independent security group, but in addition to that, we have a network operations center that's 24/7, 365 days a year. What they have, more and more of our resources are going towards buying security tools. We're monitoring the network. We're monitoring web applications. We have spam and virus filtering. During the bomb threats, we saw one IP address probe our network 312,000 times in a 24-hour period. So it's just a major challenge to keep up with security. And I will say that during the bomb threats and the anonymous video that followed that, if it had not been for the resources, with everything that we feel we're putting toward that, if it hadn't been for the resources of the U.S. Attorney's Office, we would have really not been able to address that. I mean, I can't tell you how valuable that was to us. And this program that is being mentioned today is something that I think is invaluable for our area. I don't think any organization or institution really can ever afford to beef up their resources to the extent that they would have all of the skills necessary to be able to fight those types of threats that come in. And I mean, we're forever indebted to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the help we got, but having more of our workforce available. I mean, a lot of security professionals have really learned on the job. We're now able to get people with security backgrounds, but having formal programs that, as they're mentioning, I see is just incredibly important and valuable.
Dr. McDuffie, I've seen a quote attributed to you of a 630% increase in cyber attacks, and I don't know whether that number is high or low. Give us some range of perspective from your position of how the cyber threat has evolved or increased.
So I don't think I actually made that quote. I tend to stay away from numbers just because people, they get trappy with the numbers game, but people really don't know. This is the most scary part about it. We really have no idea of how bad the issue really is, of how much of it, but we know that we're short. We know we don't have enough, but in order to quantify in reality exactly what it is, first you have to get the entire community to talk about it using the same language, which is one of the things that the National Cybersecurity Workforce Framework is all about, trying to get different sectors to talk about the cybersecurity workforce using the same language, so you can start to count exactly how many people you have working that issue, and you can start to do gap analysis and see how much you really need to fulfill that. Briefly, I would guess every estimate that I've seen, I think they're always low, because they really don't take the full spread into play. Typically, they're looking at just the cyber warriors. You hear that phrase thrown around a lot. say, well, we need 1,000 more of these, or we need 30,000 more of these. Typically, they're talking about national defense issues. They're talking about the Department. The DOD employs some 2/3 of all the cybersecurity professionals that work for the federal government. So they have a huge mission in terms of protecting national security assets. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. 85% of the critical infrastructure in this country is controlled by the private sector. The Banking Institute, you have energy, transportation, you think about your power grid. There's a thing called the smart grid that's coming down out of NIST, where I work, National Institute for Standards and Technology. That are all contain cyber threats in them. So you're going to need, I think there's over 4,000 private utility companies across the country. There's going to be a need for training and education of personnel at all of those facilities. You're going to need to educate the general population, because we're all going to connect it to the cyber, to that smart grid. Local government, state government, tribal and regional all have the same kind of issues in protecting personal information that the federal government has. So you're going to have need for people working there. All those private sector companies are going to have need. So no matter where you go, where you look, there's a need for trained people in this space. So nobody's counted all those numbers and put it together. So I think they're all low. The other part that I want to mention, we've mentioned this a couple of times already today, about how prevalent the threat is, and the idea that there's going to be the cyber Pearl Harbor and everything. And so you hear that over and over again. It becomes almost a negative psychological component to that, because people are waiting for the sky to fall and the sky hasn't fallen. You know, we seem to still be getting along okay, even though the people are talking about how bad this threat is. So there's a whole nother reason why you should think about cybersecurity as an important area for your children, for the community, for everybody to pay attention to and to get involved with. There's a problem in this country with STEM education in general, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and U.S. citizens going into those fields. The whole economic engine and development in this country is based on STEM. You know, for the last 20, 30 years, all the advances, the reason why the United States is still the economic powerhouse that it is because we have brilliant people coming out of our colleges and universities that push STEM forward. Imagine any of those fields without a computer. You can't do STEM without computers. All those computers are always connected. They're always interconnected with each other. So there's a need for cybersecurity just to make sure that STEM continues to evolve and progress. Here's a whole nother reason, regardless of the threat vector, regardless of the bad guys out there, that you want to really push this idea of cybersecurity, because it's going to be the underlying enabler of the entire STEM enterprise as we move forward. And for students who are interested in things other than just cybersecurity, computer science, or those kind of things, they'll find that they become very valuable by mapping that interest with some other scientific interests, like I want to be a biologist and I'm also doing cybersecurity work, where you're going to become doubly valuable because you'll be able to speak languages across those disciplines. And we're finding that that's really the trend for workforce as we go forward. The person who's well educated becomes the person who's most easily trained, the person who understands multiple disciplines that can speak across them becomes extremely valuable to the business community, who are looking for people who can be dual-hatted and wear those kind of multiple jobs. So there's a lot of reasons why community colleges, universities, high schools, everybody should really be thinking about cybersecurity as a future career field.
Thanks. Now, you all know our friend Bill Flanagan, who's joined us today, so I'm going to invite Bill to come up to the podium, who can direct questions both to the panel and receive questions from all of you, so we can incorporate that into this discussion. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, David. We are off to a great start. We thought this would be a great way to do the format, because now David gets to be one of the experts too, so he can respond to your questions, comments, or whatever. I think everybody got a card, or should have had cards in your packets. So the way we work this is you just jot down your question, comment, thought, whatever, for the panelists in general, for any one of them in particular, and somebody will be around to grab the cards and bring them up to me. And I'll start off while they're gathering up the cards with the first question, and I guess I'm trying to get my head around exactly what we're talking about here. David, you mentioned everything from identity theft all the way up to nation states, which is a huge universe of potential issues, of talent, skills, and everything that we needed. So what, is that really what we're talking about when we think about cybersecurity? Is it that broad?
It is, and I think that if you wanted to get a better reference than me, you could pull up the testimony of FBI Director Mueller from March of last year when he was in front of Congress, or Joe Demarest, who's the head of cybersecurity in the FBI today, who was just there recently. But they speak in terms of 5 different categories of cyber threats. Generally, we have just the cyber thief is category 1. That might be someone who steals your identity, goes into your email account, and does that for financial profit. A second would be like the people we were dealing with at the University of Pittsburgh, a hacktivist or an anarchist. And if you remember, we had 3 threat streams there. The first was not a cyber threat stream, it was handwritten. But the individual we charged appears to be, based on his profile, a serial threatener. And the other individuals who were the anonymous threateners who came on behind, one of whom was sentenced today, appear to be people who are not proceeding secretly, but trying to call attention to themselves and advertise that they can disrupt. And then there are cyber terrorists, people who are using the cyber means to terrorize. And then there are clearly individuals and individuals aligned with nation states that have the purpose of engaging in organized cyber disruptions or organized cyber theft, theft of technology. There's a story today in the national news about the theft of technology of some of our military secrets. It's just one example. So these are the broad categories of the problem.
I wonder, thinking about those categories, Sergeant McDuffie, and you mentioned what 2/3 of all the folks working in this space are in the DoD, so they're all brainiacs. You got great universities, you got all these people on the case. How much do we really have to worry? How big is the threat, especially from these big external nation states, cyber terrorists?
It's really interesting. I mean, when you think about the DoD space, it's really not all brainiacs from universities. There's a lot of enlisted men and women who have just came out of high school, joined the military, and DoD does a fantastic job in terms of training. You talk about vocational training. They are really world class in their ability to take someone with no background at all and train them up to the point where they can really do an outstanding job in that particular area that they're looking to work on. So a huge percentage of them are of that ilk. The threat is really broader than you can really imagine. It's morphed a lot over the last 20 years. I mean, 25 years ago, you would have a hacker whose goal was just to mess up your website, to make it look funny or something. That was their goal, and they were trying to get bragging rights for doing that. Well, it has evolved so far beyond that now. Not only rogue nation states, but organized crime organizations. Certainly, everyone's gotten the email from Nigeria, where your long lost uncle is leaving you $25 million, and if you send them the right bank account.
I got one of those today, as a matter of fact. Right. Got my money for me, yeah.
So that's an organized effort. You imagine, so nobody's falling for this anymore, but it only takes 1%, 0.5%, for those guys to make money off of those kind of operations. It was interesting. I know the president of EC Council. It's a company that sponsors the Ethical Hacker Conference and does the global Olympiad. There's a Cyber Olympiad challenge that really pits countries against each other in competitions. So he speaks around the world on this issue of cybersecurity, and he got called from Nigeria to come speak there. And so he was like, Nigeria, really? I don't think I really want to go there. So tell them, my fee is really high, and maybe they won't ask me. But they paid his fee, and he came over there and found himself in a stadium with 5,000 people to hear him speak about the importance of cybersecurity, because the country itself recognizes the negative impression that they have in the world, and are really proactively going after those people within the country that are doing that. It's so much so that they invited them back the following year, and there was like 8,000 people in the audience. So they're all over the world. People are recognizing that there are bad actors out there, and that they have to, you have to act locally, but you have to think globally, because the issue is really, it doesn't recognize borders at all. And as long as there are human beings on the planet, we're going to be the weakest link in any cybersecurity system. The phishing expeditions, how they get into your password, and taking over your grandmother's laptop and making it part of a million computer botnet that launches a denial of service attack, and then the FBI shows up at your grandmother's door and she had no idea, that her machine had been compromised. So that kind of thing is still going on, and it really is broader than we can imagine.
When you think about finding the talent, actually, I wonder, you talked about how much the group that's working on this space has expanded at Pitt. Easy to find these people, tough to find? What kind of people do you need to do this kind of work inside an organization like the University of Pittsburgh?
Well, it's wonderful to have people that are specifically trained in security, and in our formal security group, that's what we look for, people that computer science degrees, but there have been very few programs that are strictly focused on cybersecurity. So we have a lot of people who are just learning on the job. And actually, in addition to those 11 people that are informally in the security group, almost every other position within the organization, some portion of their job is security. I feel like most of my job is security, because that's what we're doing, protecting data, protecting research, protecting the university against all these threats. And any level of the organization, from the help desk clear through the security team, has to have some knowledge, and it's either on the job or through formal education.
Mike, I got a question for you from the audience, and it speaks beyond just beyond the IBEW, but the Builders Guild in general in Western Pennsylvania. Is there any existing vocational training for these kind of cybersecurity occupations currently?
Cybersecurity in specific, not that I'm aware of, but on the periphery. Our apprentices are all trained to be electricians. They're actually the people that install these systems. So they're actually called in if there's a problem with the hardware component.
Okay.
But as far as the cyber end, not to my knowledge, but as I've read up on the subject of cybersecurity, I just see many, many parallels. Even the reference to the DoD and using military people in training, I would characterize our apprenticeship programs as militaristic in the sense that failure is not an option. You will come in, you will correlate the academic end with the hands-on vocational end. You can't be absent. There's zero tolerance drug policy. So I think the model we have fits very well to one level of the workforce that's needed for cybersecurity.
When I think about IBEW, it's kind of wires and it's physical, right? Mm-hmm. But how much of an interplay is there between the software side of this and the hardware? Does Mike need to be as concerned, and do his apprentices need to be as concerned as the software engineers that are studying at Pitt?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a clear connection between both the software and hardware side. There's a whole issue of supply chain, risk management of the supply chain, which really speaks to the hardware side of the issue. You buy systems, and these systems are made by international conglomerates, and you have no idea where some piece of hardware may have been manufactured around the globe, and embedded in that hardware can be backdoors and traps that would allow bad actors to access the system once they're fully deployed. So there's hardware issues involved. You need engineers that are looking at those things, as well as the clear software issues that deal with that. The hands-on training is really a critical piece. This idea that you do just academic work and you understand the theoretical issues, and then you get thrown out into the workplace. That person's not going to be able to, on day one, to sit down and start defending your system. You have to have the combination of the academic and the practical, really, to have someone who's job ready. Some of the certification organizations, your ISC Squared, your CompTIAs, your SANS, are really starting to focus now on hands-on training to make sure that people with their certifications not only understand the theoretical aspects, but actually can do what the certification claims that they can do, so employers can rely on those certs to say that this person has the hands-on recent training. They go through refresh. If you've got somebody who was certified 15 years ago and hasn't taken a course in 15 years, that person is not ready to do any kind of work in your space. So you have to look at all of those issues. So those kind of vocational trainings that focus on hands-on and refresh are really important in this space.
Is there one question from the audience too? Any thoughts about who would hire cybersecurity graduates right here in our region? In other words, what's the demand like right now? Do companies know they need them, and how many do they need? Do we know?
Well, my experience is that the companies that we're working with are all looking to increase their bench strength in this area. But it is not just victim companies who, like the University of Pittsburgh or PNC, that have been publicly identified as subject to attack. It's other companies that are watching, that are in the same industries or in the same space, that are looking to avoid an attack. And part of the awareness mission of Dr. McDuffie's group is to generate greater data and greater sharing. You know, for the longest time in this area, a person who was hit by a cyber attack would not report it because they would be either embarrassed, or the person who would be reporting it would be, in theory, the IT person who was also charged with a security function that they may or may not, in that era, have been given the tools to fulfill. And we tell the story all the time that a bank that is robbed by a masked gunman does not have a moment's hesitation to report that as a crime. But for the longest time in the cyber arena, someone who would be hacked would not tell that story. And this increase in awareness and this increased reporting has created sort of a geometric progression of awareness and then opportunities. And there are now security consulting companies out there that would provide jobs. There are individual companies that need to increase their bench strength. As Dr. McDuffie said, the overwhelming majority of people are hired in the government. So I see personally no shortage of platforms for people to get hired. What I see is a mismatch between the threat and the workforce. The workforce is not matching the threat, and that's why I'm so hopeful we can do something special here.
A question from Paula Schubach. What funding can be brought to bear for the purpose of cybersecurity workforce development? Is this an area of investment, or is it every student for him or herself to try to get the skills?
So at the federal level, well, at all governmental levels, everyone understands that budgets are under attack, and it's very difficult to have funding for new programs. Cybersecurity, though, has enjoyed bipartisan support for the last decade. Everybody kind of gets it that it's an important area. There's a scholarship program. In fact, when my first entry into federal government at the National Science Foundation, I was the program manager for a thing called the Federal Cyber Corps Scholarship for Service Program. That program provides 2 years of a full ride for the last 2 years of a bachelor's, master's, or PhD. And in return for that, the student promises to come to work for the federal government for 2 years. That program's been ongoing for about 10 years now. It's got something like a 95% success rate. It means 95% of the students who get that scholarship not only complete their degree program, but complete their 2 years of service to the federal government. The goal being that they stay with the federal government as a lifelong employee, and we're just now doing some longitudinal studies to see how well that's gone. Most of those individuals have ended up working in the intelligence community, so it becomes kind of difficult to track them. They kind of disappear after a while. But we're doing a classified study to get a handle on that as well. That program operates at about a $10 million a year level. Just recently, in the last 2 years, got a $45 million increase in budget, a one-time increase, because Congress saw that as such an important activity that they did that. When I came on board back in 02, 03 timeframe, we were operating at about $6 or $7 million a year, and the same kind of thing happened even at that stage. One of my first tasks, I was on the job maybe 3 days, and a congressional budget thing came through, and I had $19 million to spend by the end of the fiscal year, which was 3 weeks away. So consequently, I made a lot of friends. Friends because of that, and to this day, a number of people in academia built their careers off of the scholarship money, because it's a different kind of scholarship program. As a student, you can't apply for the scholarship directly. You have to find a school that's a center of academic excellence and information assurance education. There's some 166 of them across the country now. Community colleges have been, it's been open to them as well. Those schools are qualified to compete for the scholarship money from NSF. NSF sends the money to professors at the school, and that professor then identifies students within the student body there that he feels has the right mentality and aptitude to come to work for the federal government. Because you can understand that these are not stupid people. The students realize that they're being trained in a very lucrative career field, and you can make a lot more money working in the private sector than you can working for federal government. So they were looking for people who had an interest in giving back, to the country. Back in 2002-03, this was, really right after 9/11. And when I was at one of the first events where there was a gathering of students of this scholarship program, and we asked them what attracted them to it, it was really a return to old-fashioned patriotism. They weren't inclined to enlist in the military and pick up a gun, but they had certain technical skills that they wanted to bring to bear in the defense of this country. So it was really a very gratifying experience, and I think that's still going on to this day.
A question, this might be for Mike or Alex. How do you screen the people who do this work? How much is that on your minds? And I probably would never think about people that are hooking up electrical equipment and stuff, have to worry about them from a security risk. But in this brave new world where software is merging with hardware and everything else, is it something that's on your mind? And how are people screened? And maybe David can pick that up too. Yeah.
We screen currently in the electrical field. We have a test that's devised that's by an independent organization, educational organization, that excludes bias, gender, racial bias, that shows a aptitude for that kind of work. So I'm going to make an assumption here that you could do the same thing for the vocational end of cybersecurity. I did hear it said here that people's names can be put forward if they have an aptitude for this, if a professor, an educator, or somebody. But from the end where you're there, maybe at, I hate to call it the lowest level, but the entry level out in the workforce, maybe doing day-to-day just monitoring, I think you can develop a test such as ours that would show that someone had the aptitude for it and then would take advantage of the education provided to them. In our case, they're paid to go to school. So you could follow that same model where they're paid to go to school, and as they progress, their pay increases. And at the conclusion of their apprenticeship with us, they become certified and have pension, health care, and a reasonable level of pay, a middle class living.
Don't you have to be extra careful with background checks in this space?
We actually are. There's always the grueling technical interviews, but we do background checks on all of our security. A lot of the people within the IT department, but specifically security goes through background checks.
So at the federal level, the vast majority of positions require security clearances. The National Security Agency, certainly at the beginning, was hiring about 80% of the graduates of the Scholarship for Service program. And to get in the door, just to walk in the door at NSA, you need a top secret security clearance. So it really behooves young people to think about the consequences of the kinds of things that go on social media, Facebook, Twitter, those kind of things. They really can come back to bite you later on when you're pursuing these kind of security clearance jobs. Good news is you have to be a U.S. citizen. So we have this influx of foreigners, particularly at the graduate level, that are in the classrooms you're competing with. But more and more in today's world, you find that the foreign student is not necessarily looking to stay in this country. They have opportunities in their own country, so they come here, get an education, and go back and become your competitors. But there's this whole class of jobs that are strictly only for U.S. citizens. And by having this clean background and being able to pass the security clearance check, you really open yourself up to a whole set of jobs that only you can compete for. So being able to do that is really a major plus for anybody.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about your social presence, your online presence, and how that can come back to bite you. I think I heard something on the radio yesterday that today's teenagers is the first generation in history that's not allowed to make mistakes, because if they live it in their online presence, they're going to live with it for the rest of their lives.
That's right.
Whereas most of us got away with being able to do a lot of things and get past it and still go on with your life. But a question related to that, Dave, maybe this is for you. Can you still attain a job in cybersecurity if you already have a criminal record in cyber crimes?
Well, it depends. It depends, but as Dr. McDuffie said, there are anecdotal stories of individuals who were on one side and became on the other.
Sure.
And one of the more famous ones happened right here in Pittsburgh. There was the prosecution of the so-called Iceman, who at the time he was prosecuted, he was the largest internet thief. I think it was $82.3 million. And he had been on the dark side, on the good side, on the dark side. He went back and forth. So he couldn't get it square. But you know, the sad fact is the ability to do good cyber work is so needed. While there are these security clearance requirements and some of them are absolute, in other areas, just like we talk about and we talked about earlier with the Green Jobs program with reentry, if a person is committed to turning their life around, certainly in the private sector they could make that opportunity. And that I have publicly said in another forum that cybersecurity is an area where reentry opportunities might even be greater than in other areas.
Okay, just because the skills are so needed and so...
They're needed,
yeah.
and you know, there are certain jobs that you can't get based upon a specific criminal record, but in this area, there might be opportunities that are in greater numbers.
So I have one of the questions here. So what would you say to a student here at CCAC or in high school or college right now, if they're kind of interested in this? What is the path? What kind of skills do you need to get while you're in school to really position yourself to be somebody who's going to be really in demand once you have the degree?
So there's a couple of things that kind of stand out. Certainly critical thinking, problem-solving skills. Mathematics is the underlying language of all things STEM, so having a strong math background certainly lends itself to this area. Discrete math, probably more so than the calculus type of thing. But the kind of skill sets that you might not think of as necessarily the things that apply themselves, certainly communications, being able to speak well and write clearly, is something that's highly prized within the cybersecurity space, because you're always trying to communicate what you found or what you've discovered to others who do not speak your language, who do not speak that tech speak. You're the C-suite individuals, the CEOs, CFOs, corporations typically are not going to have a STEM background, and if you're able to communicate clearly to them and you have the technical background behind you as well, you become very valuable in the corporate structure. So those kind of soft skills, the communication skills, are very important. Focus on mathematics, critical thinking, problem solving, also very important. I was at an event where there were a group of presidents of liberal arts schools who were kind of interested in this idea that, you know, STEM is getting all the buzz. You know, where do I do with my liberal arts students? And we're finding, particularly in the analytic arena, intelligence analysts need to understand things like anthropology and sociology and cultural norms. What does privacy mean to someone in Afghanistan versus someone in Singapore versus someone in Idaho? You know, understanding those kind of differences makes a real difference to how you do analytic work in this realm that really doesn't see any kind of cultural borders. We found that people that have strong musical backgrounds seem to have their brains wired in a certain way that lends itself to this analytic function, lends itself to mathematical analysis. Music is very mathematical. And really, they found superstars in these areas that are really outside of the normal realm that you think of. So, it goes back to aptitude. Certainly, there are some really good general aptitude tests out there that can tease out whether it's something that you're interested in, but it's so broad, there are a lot of areas that really lend themselves to it.
A couple of questions that are kind of related to that, not so much for the high school student or the college student looking up, but more about the older transfer student, whatever, somebody's already got some skills, some career, and is now thinking about, well, how do I get into this if it's such a big deal? So one of the questions is, how would a person with specific skills in one field be able to get more information and be able to pursue this? But another one a little more specific, this was from an adult student who tried to transferred into Pitt's electrical engineering department, found it extremely difficult and almost intimidating, I guess, and the implication being somehow being the transfer student, it was very difficult to make that transition. So I guess the question is, do you think the educational system is working hard enough for people who have an interest to really open the doors and get them plugged in and to make it a possibility? James, I don't know if you want to.
Well, let me offer this. A lot of these efforts intersect. We have a youth crime prevention effort here underway, and we're becoming to appreciate that while we were focused on early grade reading and sixth grade math and high school graduation rates, we might have been ignoring some guidance that was in the truancy and absentee numbers, especially looking deep into those numbers. And as part of that effort, we're finding that many of the students, we're raising a generation where more than half their lives, and for some, their total life has been cyber-based. We're finding students aren't going to school because either they're more interested in doing the cyber play work at home, or they can't relate to the book learning without the cyber tools. And so we're thinking of cyber being a magnet to get those students back engaged, and that it'll have several downstream benefits. And so, but it is also true, let's face facts, it is also true that a person like me, the majority of my life was without a cyber platform, and I must work harder to acquire that skill. And that's certainly true of anyone my age, and mostly anyone 2/3 of my age. And so part of the component of a really good Western Pennsylvania initiative, and this is where I think Mike and organized labor fit in, is making cyber a component of retraining. And we've done a really good job here in Western Pennsylvania transitioning from a real assault on our workforce really around 1982, where we had the absence of our manufacturing base, and we've transitioned in a way that people write articles about it. But we're not done, and we have more to do. And because of our great history here, our great ability to adapt, and the great hardworking people that are here, as well as the heroic and patriotic response that this region has shown over and over again, this is a time for this region to turn to cyber and meet the call that's coming from the national leadership that is in anything you can go home. Go home from here and just read a little on your own. There is a huge shortfall. This is what Dr. McDuffie does. This is his document, the strategic plan, which is available online. There is a huge shortfall between the need and the capacity, the talent pool. And at every level, we have to get after it, Bill.
One of the things that the University of Pittsburgh is doing is saying that every student has an opportunity for an internship, and within our organization, we're starting to develop internships. So for the student you were talking about in electrical engineering or something, we're hoping to have real life opportunities, like real work opportunities for them to intern with us and get those kind of skills there. And I think that might tie into a number of things you're talking about.
Absolutely, yeah. Internships are a critical piece. They were a requirement in the Scholarship for Service program. They do an internship with the federal agency, hopefully that's going to hire them so they can start the security process, clearance process early, and all of that. But you asked the question about pathways and how does someone get in, particularly if they're an adult, not the typical student coming back. So we've got issues with returning veterans, wounded warriors, people with disabilities. Computer science in the STEM field has historically been underrepresented by minorities and women. So you have this whole groups of individuals that can look to cybersecurity as an entry point. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, there's not one golden pathway to follow. There's multiple pathways. People often talk about the pipeline. I like to think about it more of as an interstate highway. There's all kinds of on-ramps and off-ramps and ways that you can progress. And it really is up to the individual to really look at themselves and what their needs are and plan out a way to make them get from where they want to be, where they are, to where they want to be. Whether it means doing a certification, doing a 6-month program at a community college. Lots of states have very strong articulation agreements between their 2-year institutions and 4-year institutions. So you complete a 2-year degree, you're automatically accepted into 4-year institutions as a junior. And psychologically it can be intimidating. I mean, personally, I went back to school to complete my undergraduate degree after an 11-year career in the military and all kinds of other real-world life experiences. So I found myself in a classroom in my 30s, going on to 40s, when I was doing my graduate work with kids that were 18, 19, 20, and from all over the world. And so, that can be very intimidating, but you'll find, once you get over that kind of psychological block, that you're really better equipped to handle those kind of situations than the younger people are, because you're focused. It's a job to you. You're trying to support a family. You have issues that are real. You understand how important those issues are. Whereas the young guy is still, I want to party tonight. There are other distractions when you're 20 years old that you might not have as a 35, 40-year-old family person. So you really have an advantage of discipline and maturity that you can take advantage of in those kind of academic settings. So you're never too old. That's always been my motto. If you want to improve your livelihood, and it's like a cliche. Education is the key, but it really, really is, and you need to really take advantage of that.
Mike, I think I've heard that even in the trades, apprentices tend to be a little older. They're not fresh out of high school typically, right?
That's true, and for the same reasons that were stated here. I mean, they're a little more mature, a little more prepared. They take the opportunity much more seriously. It actually didn't come along as easily for them. And it's a little more complicated than what the average person thinks it is. The level of training is a little more intense, so they're not intimidated by it. So, it definitely has trended that way and continues to.
Interesting question, kind of related to all of this. Is there any cultural film or television initiative that addresses the stereotype of being a geek? In China, hackers/geeks are national heroes, but in the U.S. you are lame, not able to get a girlfriend, etc. How can we make society want to fill these positions by changing our perspectives of people that actually love technology and are good at it? Anybody?
Well, I actually think that's turning around with all these CSI and a lot of these programs that really seem to focus on the coolness of being able to solve problems. I mean, I think for women in technology, one of the issues was being viewed as being geeky, as you're talking about. I mean, that was really a stereotype. And but honestly, I think if you watch television, one night a week, you're going to find at least one show like NCIS showing all of the problems that can be solved by someone who really is good with computers and in these STEM fields.
Remember the show 24?
Yeah.
That had the female in that key role of tech, and she ended up actually leading the office that people went by. Yeah, I think that cultural perception is actually changing. One of the things through the cyber competitions that we've got a group at the Department of Homeland Security is looking at bringing all the different ones together and forming teams that meet on a regular basis and have regular competitions a la March Madness in basketball at the college level, where you could actually follow these cyber teams competing across the country and the world. And who knows, one day we'll have an ESPN2 channel, following
right.
these cyber competitions. There's some challenges about how you make it enjoyable, to watch. It's like if you don't play chess and you go to a chess tournament, it's not really that captivating. So if you don't understand cyber and you go to a cyber challenge, what's going to captivate you? So we're coming up with ways to really present those challenges on TV screens so that they're really captivating to the lay audience.
Very good. A couple of questions that I think are general for everybody in the room, even those who may not envision themselves ever working directly in cybersecurity. But what can the average person do to help? One question, what can we as teachers and students do to help? How can ordinary individuals help to thwart cyber attacks? Is it as simple as changing your password every now and then? I mean, again, what can all of us do to help prevent this danger? David, you want to start? Maybe we'll let everybody.
Well, I mean, we use a statement that a well-informed community is a safer community, and we're about the business of trying to protect the public welfare. So we've done some outreach in this arena, but a couple things for this setting would be you should change your password frequently. We find that hackers go where they find there's been sort of dust on the password change. You should not give your information to others. We have countless examples of people who give their information to others and then don't understand how they've been hacked. In the smaller outreaches, when we're talking about identity theft, which, believe it or not, is a huge piece of the outreach I do, we give people instruction on how to use their MAC card and how to shield their MAC card. And there are actually hackers out there, and I was talking about the Iceman. I think, Jimmy, I don't know if he did Mac thefts, but there are these hackers who actually come in and put a device over the Mac machine, and you're putting your information on a screening medium that's taking it for a criminal use. And so we take these steps and we do this outreach, but certainly a lot more can be done, don't you think?
Absolutely. So if you go to DHS's website, look up Stop, Think, Connect. This is the campaign slogan. It was partly developed in the private sector of the National Cybersecurity Alliance. Stop, Think, Connect is the public-facing for everyone. You have a whole plethora of free information and resources that would allow you to download this information, go out into your own community, whether it's your PTA, your local church group, whatever, and conduct little workshops about what you can do as individuals to protect your home system, make sure you have encryption on your local Wi-Fi network in your home. Passwords are certainly important, firewalls, making sure you have the most current updates to patches for systems on your machine. But the Stop, Think, Connect website, you can become a friend of the campaign. They'll send you bi-weekly newsletters that will highlight threats and highlight different resources and tools that you can use. So there actually are a lot of resources that are out there available to the general public for free that will really put you a step ahead. If you're a small business owner, the FCC has a website particularly targeted to small businesses. Here you're really strapped in terms of resources and personnel, so you're not going to have time to do a lot of deep study or hire 15 cybersecurity experts to protect your company. You can go to this website, the FCC, and in 30 minutes of reading and answering questions, it'll generate for you an automatic to-do list that will help improve your cybersecurity status for your company. So there's lots of things that are available out there.
Anybody else? Jinx, I wanted to run a college campus. What do you tell everybody at Pitt? How do you manage to control that unruly crowd?
Yeah, we've been celebrating Cybersecurity Month for about 8 years out of the 10 it's been in place. But we have a website that it's a security kind of one-stop stopping. It has all the security tools, and it's similar to what Dr. McDuffie was talking about, that's available for free, but on ours you're able to download all the security tools that will help you scan your computer. We provide spam and virus filtering. We provide a lot of software tools that you can use for your own machine. We do a lot of things centrally as well, and actually some of the resources that are available publicly, we're probably going to start to link to from our central site that anyone can get to.
Well, very good. I think this is reinforced to me again the sheer sweep of the challenge that we're facing as individuals, as communities, as a nation. and why everybody does need to take it very personally. It begins with each one of us. Clearly, there's a lot more we need to do as institutions to train the right people and get them prepared, and as a nation to make sure that we can protect ourselves from what is a real and very growing threat. So how about a round of applause for our panelists? And now it's my pleasure to reintroduce Dr. Johnson to wrap things up.
Let's extend also a round of applause to Bill Flanagan. He does such an extraordinary job of taking your comments and your questions and ensuring that they get answers. Once again, we also want to thank the Honorable David Hickton for his presence here today, Dr. Ernest McDuffie, who traveled all the way from D.C., also Jinx Walton, who had to just come from the other side of town, but nonetheless put in an appearance today, and our good friend Mike Dunleavy from IBEW. Your remarks were so insightful, and they really, I think, promoted a very, very robust conversation that we can use to develop more fully the foundation for this Pittsburgh CyberSecurity initiative that Dave talked about. We recognize as a result of what's happening in the world today that we have to be proactive to securing the rights of the citizens of our country. We have to also safeguard government interest as well, and of course protect corporate intellectual capacity, and there's no better way to do that than to have a trained and educated workforce that's developed in concert by CCAC and our four-year institutions, including the University of Pittsburgh and Duquesne. I want you all to be prepared for our fall edition of the BobMill Labor Management Institute lecture series. Charlie is going to probably provide you with some material on what our next topic will be, but based on the attendance, these seem to be well received and very informative, and thank you so much for your support.